Imagine visiting a city that today stands as a symbol of modernity and history, but that in a few decades might be reduced to memories in old photographs. What leads thriving and vibrant metropolises to face threats so great they seem straight out of a science fiction movie? Whether due to natural phenomena, human error, or climate change, various cities around the world are literally living on borrowed time, as if destiny is challenging them to endure. Hello, restless minds. I'm Code, and this is Discover It, where curiosity knows no limits. Subscribe and help the channel grow because every time you like, comment, or share, you're helping us bring these discoveries to more people. Together, we can create a community where curiosity can change the world. But are these threats inevitable, or is there still time to reverse the course of history? After all, what happens when the forces of nature and human actions converge to transform iconic cities into future submerged or destroyed relics? Few cities in the world carry as much cultural and historical significance as San Francisco. This vibrant California metropolis is not only a landmark of the United States, but also a bustling hub of innovation, art, and diversity. However, beneath its steep streets and its iconic Golden Gate Bridge lies a threat that could forever change the city's fate: the San Andreas Fault. This gigantic geological instability line cuts through California and holds the potential for one of the greatest natural disasters in modern history. You know that phrase, living on the edge? San Francisco took it way too seriously. The city is literally sitting on a line of destruction. Who needs a roller coaster when you have the San Andreas Fault? The San Andreas Fault is the result of the movement of the Pacific and North American tectonic plates, which constantly slide against each other. Although this movement may seem distant, it is a constant warning for scientists and residents. Recent studies indicate a 75% chance of a devastating earthquake with a magnitude of up to 9 on the Richter scale hitting the region by the year 2086. But are we truly prepared for such a catastrophic event? The city's history doesn't inspire confidence. The Great Earthquake of 1906 already demonstrated the destructive power of the San Andreas Fault. Back then, over 80% of the city was destroyed, and fires caused by structural damage amplified the chaos. Since then, technology has advanced, and buildings have become more resilient. But is that enough to withstand the force of nature? After all, more than 113 years have passed without a major event from the fault, accumulating energy that could be released at any moment. Another alarming point is the human impact. With over 7 million inhabitants in the San Francisco Bay Area, an earthquake of this magnitude would not only threaten lives, but also collapse the region's economic and infrastructure systems. Imagine what would happen to bridges, hospitals, and power grids if suddenly shaken by such an event. What could be done when everything around becomes unstable? Moreover, scientists point out that the region's own terrain, with unstable grounds and coastal areas, could amplify the earthquake's effects. Have you ever stopped to think about how something as beautiful and iconic as the Golden Gate Bridge might be impacted? Although designed to withstand major tremors, could it survive a disaster of this magnitude? And no matter how much we try to imagine solutions, the truth is that the question isn't if the earthquake will happen, but when. Population preparedness and infrastructure resilience will be crucial to minimize the impact. However, when the ground starts shaking, will we be ready to face nature's relentless force? Venice, the city that seems to float between its canals, has always evoked the idea of romance and timeless beauty. But this jewel of Italy, which has inspired artists, poets, and adventurers for centuries, is slowly succumbing to an inevitable fate, sinking. Despite its charm, Venice faces an unequal battle against time and natural forces, a struggle that didn't begin today, but has intensified alarmingly over the past few decades. The cause of this sinking is a combination of human and natural factors. Over the past century, excessive groundwater extraction has weakened the sediments beneath the city, while soil compaction, a result of centuries of heavy construction, has worsened the situation. Additionally, the Adriatic tectonic plate on which Venice rests is slowly shifting and contributing to the city's decline. Isn't it strange to think that something as solid as land can actually be in constant motion and transformation? The rise in sea levels due to climate change is perhaps the most concerning factor. Studies indicate that Venice is sinking by 1 to 2 millimeters per year. Although this may seem minimal, the cumulative impact over decades is alarming. In the next 20 years alone, the city is expected to sink approximately 80 millimeters relative to sea level, making the floods that already inundate its streets even more frequent. What was once a rare phenomenon, known as acqua alta, is now almost routine, disrupting the daily lives of Venetians and threatening their historical heritage. But is nature solely to blame? Venice is also a victim of human choices. Since the 1960s, warnings have been issued about the impact of water extraction and soil compaction. Efforts to address the problem have been made, but were often delayed or insufficient. Currently, projects like MOSE, a system of movable barriers to contain flooding, have been implemented but not without criticism. Are these barriers the definitive solution or merely a temporary fix for a much larger problem? Furthermore, the situation affects not only residents but also the economy. Tourism, which sustains much of the city, is threatened by these changes. Imagine visiting Venice, and instead of taking pictures by the canals, you're paddling to escape a flood. It's like a vacation in survival mode. How can Venice continue to attract visitors when its squares are constantly flooded? Will Venice one day be seen only as a memory in museums and historical records? What is certain is that no matter how beautiful and resilient Venice is, it is racing against time. Between expensive solutions and political disputes, the city seems to be at the mercy of both the waters and human failures. The question echoing through its canals is, can we save the city of dreams before it disappears forever? Mexico City, with its rich history and vibrant culture, is a metropolis that defies logic. Built on the remnants of Tenochtitlan, the ancient Aztec capital, the city shouldn't even exist. Literally, it was erected over Lake Texcoco, a natural basin that served as the foundation for Aztec civilization, but was drained and occupied over centuries. This past, combined with the reckless exploitation of its natural resources, has left the city in an extremely vulnerable position. The sinking of the ground is one of the most visible consequences. Some areas of the city have sunk as much as 40 centimeters per year at their worst. Currently, the average rate is 7 centimeters annually, which is still alarming. To put this into perspective, parts of the city have sunk over 10 meters in the past century. How can such a large city continue to function while literally sinking into the ground? The main cause of this subsidence is the extraction of water from underground aquifers. With a population of over 20 million people, the demand for water is immense. Since the 1940s, excessive groundwater pumping has depleted underground reserves, causing the clay soil to contract and making it incapable of supporting the city's weight. This has led to cracks in streets, tilting buildings, and constantly damaged infrastructure. Can you imagine living in a place where the ground beneath your feet is always shifting? Another contributing factor is the historical impact of Spanish colonization. When the conquerors arrived, Lake Texcoco began to be drained to facilitate construction and territorial control. This process disrupted the natural balance that the Aztecs had maintained in the region, accelerating soil degradation and the city's vulnerability. Ironically, progress has made the city more fragile than its founders could ever have imagined. To combat this problem, several initiatives have been proposed, from reducing groundwater extraction to artificially recharging aquifers. However, implementing these solutions in such a densely populated city with limited resources is a monumental challenge. Can Mexico City find a balance between meeting its population's needs and preserving its own existence? Meanwhile, residents continue to deal with the practical consequences of this subsidence: compromised infrastructure, high repair costs, and constant uncertainty about the future. What will happen to this city in the next 100 years if the current pace continues? Will Mexico City, this symbol of historical resilience, be able to withstand the forces that threaten it once again? Next to one of the most historic and fascinating cities in the world, Naples, lies a dormant yet restless giant, the Campi Flegrei supervolcano. Known to few outside Italy, this volcanic complex not only poses a local threat, but also a global one, with the potential to cause a catastrophe rivaling few disasters in human history. With craters, fumaroles, and geysers dotting the landscape, it appears peaceful, but its history tells a much more alarming story. Campi Flegrei, meaning burning fields, is one of the largest volcanic complexes on Earth. It spans an area approximately 13 kilometers in diameter, located west of Naples in a densely populated region. This supervolcano is formed by a caldera, a massive underground magma reservoir in constant motion and expansion. And while it has been dormant for about 500 years, scientists warn that it is showing signs of activity that could culminate in a devastating eruption within the next few centuries. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to live with a ticking time bomb beneath your feet? The history of Campi Flegrei is unsettling. Around 39,000 years ago, one of its eruptions was so massive that it released a colossal amount of ash and gases into the atmosphere, covering much of Europe and altering the global climate. It was one of the largest eruptions in our planet's history. Largest eruption in history? Campi Flegrei was like the student who gets a perfect score in destruction. If it decides to repeat that feat, you can guess. Nothing will be left to tell the tale. Since then, several smaller eruptions have occurred, shaping the landscape and creating the craters that now attract tourists, but also spark constant concern. The proximity to Naples exacerbates the situation. The city, with nearly 1 million residents, is only a few kilometers away from the volcano. Moreover, Campi Flegrei is just 30 kilometers from the infamous Mount Vesuvius, whose eruption in 79 AD destroyed the cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum. It's as if the region sits at the center of one of the most vulnerable points on the planet, surrounded by natural forces waiting for the right moment to erupt. Scientists monitor the area with advanced technology, analyzing ground deformation, gas emission levels, and seismic activity. In recent years, a significant increase in the caldera's inflation has been recorded, indicating that magma is accumulating. Although no one can predict exactly when or if a major eruption will occur, the risk is undeniable. Is it possible to prevent a disaster of such magnitude or merely mitigate its effects? And what about the people living nearby? For many, Campi Flegrei is just a part of daily life, a distant reminder of a historical past. But does this confidence border on recklessness? History has already shown that underestimating the forces of nature can be a fatal mistake. The question remains, is the world prepared to face the awakening of a giant like Campi Flegrei? Berezniki, an industrial city located in the Ural Mountains, might at first glance appear to be a typical Russian city. But beneath its surface lies an invisible scenario that threatens not only the infrastructure, but also the daily lives of its 150,000 inhabitants. Built directly over old potash mines, Berezniki faces a unique and devastating problem, a constant sinking that has turned parts of the city into dangerous and unstable terrain. The origin of this problem dates back to the 1980s, during the Soviet era, when potash mining was an economically vital activity in the region. However, as vast quantities of ore were extracted, enormous underground voids were left behind. The roofs of these caverns were supported only by salt pillars, a solution that seemed functional at the time but failed the test of time. In 2006, a freshwater spring began seeping into the mines, dissolving the pillars and causing ground collapses. These collapses have resulted in giant sinkholes that have swallowed residential and commercial areas of the city. The largest of these, nicknamed the Grandfather, measures an astonishing 400 meters in diameter and more than 200 meters deep. Imagine looking out your window and seeing a sinkhole slowly and inexorably encroaching on your neighborhood. How do you continue living in a place where the ground beneath you can literally disappear at any moment? The social and economic impacts of this phenomenon are equally severe. A significant portion of the population has been displaced, and entire areas have been abandoned, transforming once bustling neighborhoods into desolate landscapes. Moreover, the constant maintenance and monitoring of ground conditions represent a massive cost for local authorities. Even the region's economy, once driven by mining, now suffers from the destruction left in the industry's wake. To address the issue, scientists and engineers have implemented advanced monitoring methods, such as sensors to detect ground movement and alert systems for emergency evacuations. But is this enough to ensure the city's safety? After all, how can you repair land that has been compromised to such a profound extent? It's a dilemma that raises questions about the legacy of irresponsible industrial practices and the price entire communities pay for them. Meanwhile, Berezniki continues its battle against time. Residents face a daily life filled with uncertainty, unsure if their homes or streets will remain intact the next day. The city serves as a grim reminder of the consequences of overexploitation and human negligence. Is it possible to reverse Berezniki's fate? Or is the city doomed to vanish beneath its own feet? Jakarta, the vibrant and chaotic capital of Indonesia, symbolizes the unchecked growth of modern megacities. With over 10 million inhabitants and a rich mix of cultures and traditions, the city serves as the economic and political heart of the country. However, Jakarta faces a threat that few places in the world experience on such a scale. It is sinking faster than any other city on the planet, a process that, if left unchecked, could transform it into a submerged metropolis within decades. The rate at which Jakarta is sinking is staggering. In some areas, the ground subsides by up to 15 centimeters per year. To put this into perspective, parts of the city are sinking a meter every 7 years. This situation is further exacerbated by the fact that nearly half of Jakarta already lies below sea level, making it extremely vulnerable to floods and rising tides. But what is causing this rapid collapse? The problem stems largely from excessive groundwater extraction. Jakarta suffers from a poorly developed piped water supply infrastructure, forcing many residents and businesses to extract water directly from underground aquifers. This depletion of natural reservoirs causes the city's clay soil to compact, leading to the subsidence. Ironically, the abundance of surface water from rivers and heavy rains contrasts sharply with the scarcity of accessible potable water. Isn't it paradoxical that a city so full of water is literally sinking because of its lack? Additionally, rampant urbanization plays a critical role. With population and economic growth, green spaces that once helped absorb water have been replaced by concrete and asphalt, further worsening drainage problems. Oh, the famous urbanization destruction combo. It's like Jakarta made a pact with chaos. I'll grow, but I'll sink in the process. When it rains, drainage systems frequently collapse, causing devastating floods that only reinforce the city's vulnerability. The situation has reached a critical point, prompting the Indonesian government to take drastic measures. Recently, a $33 billion plan was approved to move the capital to a safer location on the island of Borneo, 160 kilometers away. This project, expected to take at least a decade to complete, aims to preserve not only the government's functionality, but also the lives of millions. But is abandoning Jakarta truly the solution? Meanwhile, the city continues to grapple with the daily challenges of its physical decline. For residents who cannot simply move capitals, life goes on amid constant flooding, compromised infrastructure, and the ever-present threat of collapse. Jakarta raises the question, how far are we willing to go to save a city? Or is it destined to become yet another tragic example of the cost of human progress? The Maldives, with its crystal-clear waters and white sandy beaches, is paradise on Earth. This archipelago of nearly 2,000 islands in the Indian Ocean is one of the world's most luxurious tourist destinations, renowned for its unparalleled natural beauty and exclusive resorts. However, beneath this idyllic facade lies a silent and growing threat that jeopardizes not only tourism but the nation's very existence: rising sea levels. The Maldives' unique geography makes it exceptionally vulnerable. The highest point of the archipelago is just 2.4 meters above sea level, meaning even a slight rise in ocean levels could have devastating consequences. With global warming and melting polar ice caps, projections indicate that much of the Maldives could become uninhabitable in the coming decades. Can you imagine such a paradise disappearing forever beneath the waves? The threat is not merely theoretical, its effects are already being felt. In some islands, coastal erosion is destroying beaches and infrastructure, while storms are becoming more intense and frequent. Local communities are being forced to deal with floods that contaminate freshwater aquifers, essential for survival. How can one build a sustainable future when the very ground they stand on is at risk of being swallowed by the ocean? Faced with this dire scenario, the Maldivian government has pursued creative and, at times, bold solutions. These include investing in artificial islands designed to withstand rising sea levels and promoting stringent environmental policies to reduce reliance on fossil fuels. In 2009, in a symbolic gesture, the then-president held a cabinet meeting underwater to draw global attention to the severity of the problem. But are these measures enough to protect an entire nation from the ocean's wrath? To be honest, building artificial islands sounds cool, but against the ocean just needs some time to win that fight. Moreover, the Maldives faces an existential dilemma that few countries encounter. What happens if the nation becomes uninhabitable? There are plans to relocate the population to other countries, but this raises questions about identity, culture, and sovereignty. How can a people maintain their identity when their homeland no longer exists? The Maldives is a powerful reminder of the impact of climate change and the price paid by those who contribute the least to the problem. While tourists enjoy unforgettable vacations, residents face the harsh reality that their paradise may disappear in the near future. The question that echoes across the blue waters of the Indian Ocean is there still time to save the Maldives, or will they become one of the first nations to succumb to the relentless advance of the sea? Rising sea levels are not just a distant threat to island nations or coastal cities in other continents. Here in Brazil, some of the most iconic and populous cities are directly in harm's way. Rio de Janeiro, with its breathtaking landscapes and central role in Brazilian culture, is one of the most emblematic examples. Studies suggest that if global temperatures rise by just 2 degrees Celsius, sea levels could increase by up to 5 meters, a devastating scenario for Rio and many other cities along Brazil's coastline. In Rio de Janeiro, historic neighborhoods like Flamengo, Botafogo, and the famous Copacabana beach could suffer from constant flooding or even partial submersion. Copacabana underwater? No way! Can you imagine the kiosks turning into islands? One of the saddest scenarios to picture. The Guanabara Bay, a postcard image of the city, would be at risk of swallowing significant portions of the surrounding urban areas. Belém, Fortaleza, Recife, and Porto Alegre are among other major Brazilian cities that would also be affected. Have you considered the economic, social, and cultural impact of losing such important parts of our history and identity? But this threat is not limited to Brazil. Around the world, coastal cities are facing the same challenges. New York, with its population of over 8 million, already experiences more frequent and severe storms that flood its subway system and cause billions in damages. Miami, built on porous soil, faces the added complication of seawater seeping through the ground, rendering physical barriers less effective. Amsterdam, in the Netherlands, is famous for its canals and dikes that have protected it for centuries, but how long will those defenses hold against a significant rise in sea levels? The situation in Shanghai, China, and Alexandria, Egypt, is equally alarming. These cities are economic and cultural hubs for their respective countries, housing millions of people and extensive infrastructure. Losing these areas would not only be a local catastrophe, but would have global implications, disrupting supply chains, financial markets, and human migration flows. Is the advance of the sea an issue that governments are addressing with the urgency it demands? Beyond cities, the impact on coastal ecosystems is also devastating. Mangroves, coral reefs, and other biodiversity-rich areas are disappearing as waters rise and salinity increases. These habitats are crucial for protecting cities from storms and sustaining fishing communities. How can we balance preserving the environment while protecting human populations? Rising sea levels are an alarming reminder that climate change is already shaping the world we live in. Billions of people could be affected directly or indirectly by these events in the coming decades. Cities once synonymous with progress and innovation may become submerged relics, a warning of what happens when we ignore nature's boundaries. Is there still time to act and save these metropolises, or are we already living in a countdown to a flooded future? What we learn from exploring the vulnerability of these cities is that the battle against nature's forces and the consequences of human actions is an ongoing struggle. From San Francisco, threatened by earthquakes, to the Maldives, facing rising seas, the fate of many iconic places depends on a delicate balance of science, technology, and political will. These stories are not just about what can be lost, but also about how we can use our knowledge and resources to preserve what is most precious. If you enjoyed this journey of discoveries, don't forget to leave a like, share with your friends, and comment below about what caught your attention the most. Maybe others can relate, and together we can spark great discussions. And of course, subscribe to the channel for more content where curiosity knows no limits.